Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us in person and online. And welcome in particular to our guests from the UK government today. It's great timing that we can share this conversation and share this research with you. To Sandro for setting this up. This is very... Thank you, Sandra. So I am fresh back from COP, a little exhausted and broken. It is very clear that the world is waking up to the significance of the built environment in terms of resolution and addressing of climate change. Both in terms of the quantum it contributes, where it's 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions from construction and running of buildings, and from the fact that this is growing really fast. It's a fundamental developmental issue that we need to get. The world is urbanizing, and we need to get affordable housing for many. But also because in the language of climate change, lock-in is massive. This is the type of sector where if we don't bend the arc fast, we're stuck with the outcome for a very, very long time. So this was front and center of the COP agenda. We were delighted to be a part of the buildings breakthrough, which included the UK government and 28 others committing to a radical shift in buildings, both from the operation and the construction perspective. So lots of energy, and COPs are good for energy and pledges and commitments and promises. They're less good for action. And what was very clear to me was there aren't many solutions out there. The problem is being identified. The political will is growing to engage on the problem. But it was great that IFC's EDGE and Buildings Resilience Index were named of one of very few supporting initiatives in the Buildings Breakthrough, and really are one of very few solutions that are holistic and that are really gathering steam and having impact. It's an extraordinary story. And I personally put that down to, it's one of, so firstly, congratulations to all of you involved in this, and it is an all of IFC endeavor. And secondly, when the stories when IFC gets it really right are stories where we pull multiple levers to move markets, and this is one of them. And from a theory of change perspective, having a free software, freeware, having a certification are necessary and important and wonderful innovations, but not sufficient. Building capacity in markets to use that freeware and do those certifications, be it from architects to construction firms to banks, is necessary, but not sufficient. Combining that with capital and money and putting money behind that to developers and to banks doing green loans and giving them the capacity building to do those kind of green loans is necessary but not sufficient. And adding some support for the first movers with blended finance, again, is necessary but not sufficient. And then final piece of that is thought leadership and insight, which is why we're here today. Together, all of those things are moving markets in an extraordinary way. And there, the story is exponential and systemic, right? The growth in certified green buildings under EDGE across 96 markets, investment across 65 million square meters, which we thumbsuck means 65 billion of investment, which we've contributed 12 billion to in 96 countries. That is systemic change. And for that, the coordination of the EDGE team, the FIG, the financial markets team, the TRP team, the GRIP team, and of course to our partnership with the UK government on the MAGC fund is really fantastic to see as we pull all the levers to move the business. So I'm excited to hear about the research today, and I'm going to hand over to my partner in crime here, Pablo.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Congratulations on the work at COP. Let me introduce myself. I work at the Development Impact Department of IFC. I lead the team there, and we are very happy to partner with Jamie and the Climate Finance Department at IFC and with the UK government to work on this great MAGC, on this very MAGC program. As you know, MAGC is unique in a number of ways. One important way in which it is unique is that it combines finance with technical assistance with research. This allows to provide a full package that allows for low-cost certification and the deployment of green building standards. So we will get today details on the results of this work. On the research work, I don't want to take a lot, I want to take very little time just to say that we see it as an integral part of the program. It is not just an appendix for disseminating the results of the program. It is also meant to inform the fine-tuning of the standards, both general standards and EDGE in particular. So we're very happy to and grateful for the opportunity to work with the FIC team, with the climate team, and we thank, of course, the partnership with the UK government. So I don't want to take more of time that can be devoted to the details of the results that will be presented. Thank you very much. Simon, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Pablo, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be here in person as well, and to take the opportunity to say hello to as many colleagues here in person. I'm Simon Hampton-Ball from the UK government, more specifically the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, DESNZ, as we like to call it, and I head up our work on international green building and investments programming, which includes our work on the MAGC program. And as we've heard from what we just heard, there's already building-related emissions have increased dramatically, and they're continuing to grow in the next couple of decades, and meaning building efficiency and green construction is really a key part of being able to reduce emissions and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And we've heard all sort of what's been going on at COP, and it's really exciting. And emerging and developing economies are key to this. And this is why the UK is really, really proud to work in partnership with IFC to support the action across the world, particularly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So in 2018, together we established MAGC, the Market Accelerator for Green Construction, and it represented the first, that I know of, UK IFC bilateral partnership specifically focused on delivering blended concessional finance for climate change in emerging and developing economies. And as we've heard, the program is working to accelerate green construction across 24 countries, improving environments, building capacity, and directly providing capital to financial institutions support the creation of certified green building portfolios and catalysing systemic change, which is really exciting. And the UK to date has provided over £100 million to expand green construction practices and technologies via the MAGC programme, as well as supporting and financing the work of the EDGE programme, which is also really exciting. And we really, really strongly value this partnership with the IFC. And it's amazing to see the amazing results we've had so far. Excited to see from the research project today, from both MAGC and EDGE. And just to add, at COP28, we announced that the UK is providing a further £36 million of funding to MAGC and extending our support by a further 2 years, really demonstrating sort of UK commitment to this cause. And we really, really value this partnership with IFC. So we look forward to working with you into the future and continuing this partnership together. And I really thank everyone in the room online from IFC for their continued ambition and drive in the global transition to a zero carbon built environment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's great to have you here. And it's great to also have Jamie and Pablo. I think that this is a case of a project that couldn't have been done without very deep collaboration, both within IFC, between development impact and climate business, and also FIG and blended finance. And of course, through the support of the UK. And as you will see during the presentation, I think that all these elements play a key role in enabling this research. So the purpose today is to give you an overview of what we're doing on the research component of MAGC. This is, as Pablo mentioned, a small but integral part of the program. And the reason is we not only want to foster green building adoption, we want to make sure of what that is doing. And that's where the research comes in. So without further ado, this is EDGE, which is the anchor for all the program. And EDGE is both a standard and a tool. And I think that that's my view. What has made EDGE so successful is that it has this free access tool that designers can access and use to lower the carbon footprint of their designs. And if they achieve 20% reduction in energy embodied in materials and in the consumption of energy and water, then they can achieve the standard. This has been very successful, as Jamie mentioned. These are the latest figures as of last quarter, but basically there has been tremendous growth. It's close now to 70 million square meters certified. There has been even more tremendous growth since the inception of MAGC, as you can see here in the graph. And again, in parallel, we want to make sure that we understand exactly what this is doing in practice. And also there's always, even for a very good thing, there's always opportunities to make it even better. So that's what we're trying to do with both MAGC, which in general tries to accelerate the adoption of green buildings in general and EDGE in particular. And with MAGC Research, which tries to complement this by generating evidence that then we can use both in the implementation of EDGE and MAGC, and also in terms of refining the tool. So this is what we are going to quickly overview today, which is the MAGC Research Program. Again, we're trying to address some of the gaps in the knowledge. And maybe a way to look at this, you see 4 components here. The first 2 are more tailored towards market intelligence. So basically, we are trying to have a landscape of the green building market in the different countries that MAGC is working. And we also want to get a better sense of what the stakeholders in the green building market consider to be the obstacles and benefits of adopting green building standards. And the third and fourth work streams here, they are more research, applied research. The third one is a bit more recent. And again, thank you very much to the UK for increasing the funding for MAGC and for MAGC Research. This is part of the new work that we have started this year, that basically we're trying to generate new estimates for the EDGE tool to use in order to allow the inclusion of new lower carbon footprint materials in EDGE designs. And we'll partner with some academic institutions there. And then the fourth component is actually the largest, is what we traditionally call the smart metering studies, but probably more formal name is the EDGE impact evaluations. And there we're trying to see, go to the field and see how EDGE units actually perform compared to units that don't have the EDGE feature. So we actually go and measure the electricity consumption and the water consumption. And I'm not talking here figuratively, and we have smart meters, so in many cases we don't need to go, but we have actually gone and checked. So it's very much a literal going there and measuring. So maybe quickly talking about the first component on the market knowledge side. We have the market maturity snapshots. And here we're trying to facilitate the work of EDGE colleagues by giving them an overview of what is the state of the green building market in the country. At the same time, we also build up on their work because a lot of this is, or I would say, in this case, the majority of this can be done thanks to the very strong presence of Edge in country. So we put all that together in a format that is accessible both to Edge teams, but also to IFC teams that are working on projects so that they can use this knowledge in the projects. And also for external audience, this is published on the Edge website, it gives an overview to the different potential users of how the market is faring. We have done this already in 11 countries using 2019-2020 data. We are working on 2 more together with Prita and my team for Brazil and Egypt. And the idea is that this is a baseline, and more or less it coincided with the launch of MAGC in these countries. And then we'll have an end line using 2024-2025 data that will also allow us to see how the market has changed. And of course, attribution is always tricky. Edge is not the only program working in these countries, but it will give an idea of how the market has evolved over the years. And then we can see how much of that could be maybe related to Edge, but hopefully will be a good pre-post comparison. Then just quickly to show you how this can be summarized, the reports are a bit more extensive, but basically we look at the country, we basically benchmark the existing green building certifications. In many cases, Edge had already been launched, but had a small presence. In some cases, it was already growing very rapidly. This is Ghana, which is a bit more of a nascent market, especially in 2020. And when we describe the landscape in terms of financial institutions, involvement in green buildings, how the public sector participates or regulates, some of the important country features, for example, in terms of what is the energy consumption mix, if there are any features like very challenging energy situation, especially if you see here, apologies for that. South Africa, for example, even in 2020 was starting to have a very challenging energy situation. So we try to highlight the main contextual features. This is complemented with the second component of the program, the stakeholder assessments, where we want to basically go to the stakeholders and ask them, what do you think would be the benefit of going green? And why are you not going green? What are the obstacles? So here is sometimes a bit difficult to get to the different stakeholders, but we think that this is an indication of where some of the narrative may lie in this country. So it's not an academic exercise in the sense that we don't have a census of all the stakeholders, but we do have, a good view, especially once you put it together and you look at cross countries. We can see some common patterns in this, and I will speak to that a bit now. We have completed Colombia and South Africa, and we're working in 5 more countries, Mexico, Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And we have 9 different sets of surveys, which are similar and related, but they're tailored to each of the groups. And we're talking to developers, policymakers, the banks, or colleagues at DFIs, development finance institutions. We're talking with real estate investors. Typically, that means REITs. We're talking with building experts, like designers, engineers. We're talking with the practitioners, which is typically real estate companies, and then with occupiers, commercial and residential. So I will share some of the insights that we're seeing when we look at across the countries. And in this case, we're already quite comfortable with the results from South Africa and Colombia. Kenya is a bit more preliminary, but it shouldn't change much. In the 3 countries, we see that all the stakeholders expect the market to grow, and that's very much in line with the anecdotal evidence that we have. This is a very hot thematic area. In terms of the perceived benefits from the demand side, so from the developers and the building experts, etc., In the three countries, we see that the common themes are the carbon footprint reduction, so the kind of public good, but also the selfish argument that they think that there is increased demand for green buildings. And that's great news because it's much easier to get people to do the right thing when it also puts money in their pocket, right? So in that sense, again, this is not an academic exercise, but we have indications that the perception of the business case is there. And likewise, on the demand side, we see the public good, reduced carbon footprint argument, but the main theme is that occupiers know that they will, or some occupiers know that they will pay lower utility bills. If you consume less energy and less water, you're paying less for energy and for water. So that's also very good news for the business case for this. In terms of the obstacles, we hear very often that it's expensive to go green or it's expensive to certify green. And this is actually a very interesting result because when we ask them how much more expensive, we typically see that they think it's way more expensive than we know that it is. And in some cases in South Africa and Colombia, it's a bit more expensive. In the case of Kenya, was in some cases like way more expensive than it really is. So to this, to us, this signals that there's still a lot of work to educate stakeholders in this. Although something that is also very interesting is that this perception of the cost of certification and construction is correlated with the self-reported familiarity with green buildings. If someone reports that they are more familiar with green buildings, then they are less likely in the survey to overshoot the cost, which also indicates that the advisory and capacity building work is having an effect because if you have been talking about this, you are more likely to know what are the actual figures behind the additional cost. And then the final bit is also good news for the business case. When we ask occupiers, and in particular residential occupiers, would you be willing to pay more to live in we actually ask them in a resource efficient building. Many of them, in the case of South Africa, for example, 80%, they indicate that they would be willing to pay up to 2% more, which is in line with the additional cost that the supply side would incur to build green. So you actually have a good business case. It's great to have MAGC pushing the adoption and addressing informational frictions and basically the uncertainty of stakeholders of how we do this and how good a business this is. But it looks like once we give them the push, this is something that should be a good business case and should be sustainable. Again, all this is indications, but we think that is useful information to guide the strategy. Then switching more to the applied research side, we are working on this study, and I will not dwell long here because it's something that this is still launching, but we would like to allow Edge tool users, Edge app users, to include new, more sustainable materials in their designs. For example, like wood and bamboo, structural wood and bamboo are very promising materials, but also green cement or green steel that have a lower carbon footprint. So there is good data for this in advanced economies, but it's challenging to get good data for this on emerging markets. So we are currently working on finding an academic partner to generate estimates of embodied carbon in these materials for all global regions and for different emerging markets. And then we will use that the Edge team will use that to update the Edge tool and then have that used in Edge design. So this is something that will take a couple of years, but should also be very promising and make the Edge tool even better. And then finally to the largest component of MAGC Research, which is the smart metering studies, the Edge impact evaluations. Here we have very good model predictions for the Edge tool for what edge certified unit is expected to save. But we have users, to summarize what we're funding. And in some cases also the actual conditions differ from what the design conditions were. Simple scenario is it was assumed that 2 people would occupy a unit, and then it's 1 or it's 3, and that changes the consumption. So we have partnered with University College London and with University of Cape Town in the case of South Africa to pilot this study, and we are wrapping that up, and we'll be launching the main phase hopefully very soon. And we'll also be launching this study in Colombia and Indonesia, also in partnership with UCL, and we also will be looking for local partners. For South Africa, within UCL, we're working with the Smart Energy Research Lab. We're working with the Energy Systems Research Group at the University of Cape Town. We have our team here at IFC, and of course we have the support, very close support from the UK. We talk a lot, and it's very useful to have the very close collaboration. It's not at all a case of take my money and come back in 5 years. We are very much thankful for the support, including for knowledge dissemination. We had very successful series of events in South Africa in collaboration with the British High Commission there. The research questions here are basically around edge, but we try not to only address the main question of how does the edge model predictions, how do the edge model predictions compare with the actual consumption. We want to go beyond that and go and measure what is the consumption of energy and water of non-edge buildings to see if the difference is in line with what we expect. But also we want to address the question of why, if we are observing any differences. And also, even if we don't observe any differences, maybe we could improve the tool to have more of an impact. And I will talk now a bit more in detail, but for example, something that we are seeing a lot is users maybe not taking full advantage of green buildings because they don't know how the equipment works, or they think that they're doing the right thing, but they actually not. So the study design is relatively simple. We want to find edge sites and sites that are not edge, but that are comparable. And here the challenge is that first, there are different versions of edge, both in the level of certification. You could have basic, advanced, and also edge has evolved over time, and especially in South Africa, we have some legacy edge. But also for non-edge, you could potentially have a site that is edge all but in name. So someone went through all the effort, but for some reason they didn't certify. So that would not be so informative to compare that with edge because it's really the same thing. So that's just an extreme example, but we see a bit of that. So a lot of work goes into identifying the proper sites that we can work with. And the way that we're thinking of anchoring this is with the edge tool predictions of consumption of energy and water that, at least from the point of view of the edge app, gives us an idea of how similar buildings are, except for being edge certified or not. And that gets a bit complicated very quickly, so I don't want to dwell on that, but if someone is interested, happy to talk more about that. But basically, the other challenge, apart from finding the sites, is we need to get the information. And getting the smart meter data is relatively easy. In the case of South Africa, not that much, because there is no centralized metering system. Each of the sites has a metering company under contract that gets that information and takes care of the billing. It's typically prepaid. So we need separate arrangements with each of the metering companies to get the data. And in order to do that, we need the relationship and we need access to them. And that's where IFC's operations and business relationships are essential, because if I walk into a developer's office and say, hey, I want to do research, they're going to be like, yeah, sure. But through the established relationships of IFC, we have been able to work with the developers and the property managers to have access to the sites, access to the managers on site, and then through them to the occupier. So we have been able to also get survey data, and we have piloted that in the pilot about the characteristics of the users, some of the perceptions in terms of how important some of the features of the home are for them, how important climate is for them, to try to have more information and be able to separate any potential impact of, for example, someone being very climate conscious and having low consumption just because of that, not because of living in a green home. So some of the key variables in the case of South Africa are domestic hot water. Consumption is consumption. So, if it's grid consumption, we would see this on the smart meter, but this is a very important variable to understand how the users are utilizing the equipment, because if we observe any differences or when we look at the smart meter consumption, we will be able to maybe hypothesize that some of the peaks in consumption, I can show you later, they are due to domestic hot water consumption. But if we don't have this additional data, we will not be able to say for sure. So this helps with the how, so to speak. And then, of course, we look very closely at the geography and the location, at the value of the units. We're focusing on low income and middle income type of housing. Then, of course, if 5 people live in the home, it's very different from 1 person living in the home, etc. So we're taking a very close look at this, and we're working in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban to have a bit of a climate variance. And I will, if someone's interested, we can go more in detail about this, but we're using smart meter, we're using surveys, we're using the reports on the sites, we're also surveying the managers. And we have piloted equipment to monitor hot water use, to monitor indoor temperature, CO2, humidity. But I would maybe give you a quick overview of what we are finding. I already talked a bit about the challenges. Maybe one last challenge I will mention in the context of South Africa, which is very important. They have very intense load shedding, so planned blackouts of 8+ hours per day when they're in stage 6, and they are often. So this has potentially a very big impact in both in how people use energy, but also in how people adapt to energy. Like many, especially for single-family homes, typically those are middle income. Typically, those are moving to solar battery solutions and trying to avoid the problem. In the type of sites that we are working, they're still not there, but that's something that we have to keep an eye on, because it might change a lot of the context that we are seeing. Then lessons learned. I will share the presentation, but basically, I will highlight here that quality research takes time. And this is a bit of a different time frame than some of the other projects that we do, but we're getting good results. And in 1 year, we'll have preliminary results from the main phase with through the seasons results. And then in 2 years, we'll have final results. We could continue with the study, but with 2 years of data, we're confident that we'll have very robust results. And I already talk about the importance of IFC relationships. But maybe 3 pilot insights, and I will stop at 45 past for questions. In the pilot, we have, let's say, about 130 households. We have a smart meter and for both electricity and water for most of the pilot sites. So at the end of the day, we can look and see how that looks. The caveat would be, the warning is, this is not results, because this is just a small sample. We didn't go through the full effort to make sure that the sample is balancing characteristics. We just wanted to test the service, test the equipment. But we can look at the pilot and see how the pilot looks. And here it's important to note that we have about 2/3 of the pilot sample is EDGE certified, and just 1/3 is not EDGE certified. And most of the pilot is in Cape Town. So Cape Town is a bit more homogeneous, even in the pilot. So when we look at the pilot, and we look at all the pilot sites across South Africa, we already see that in the pilot, the EDGE households consume less electricity, 42 kilowatt hours less. So this is in line with what the model would predict. But interestingly, when we go and just look at Cape Town, where we have more homogeneous homes, so we're comparing more apples to apples, at least they're apples, there might be different kinds of apples, but we see an even sharper reduction in the electricity consumed by the edge households, 75 kilowatts hour. And this is substantial savings, like 200 Rand plus per month. That's more than $10. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually significant in the context of South Africa, and especially for low income and middle income. So again, this is not results, but what we're seeing is kind of in line with we would expect. And when we look at the water, if we look, yeah. Yes, it's in line. 42 would be actually already in line. 75 is actually more than the line. But again, that's why we don't put the percentage, because then people run with it. But so far, what we're seeing, it's in line with what we will have predicted just with the model predictions. If anything is, but again, don't make a lot out of it. But if anything is more than what the models would predict. When we look at the water, actually, it's a bit, at first sight, it's a bit of a different story. Here, we don't have a statistically significant difference between the consumption of edge and non-edge, although the average is a bit, actually, the average is a bit higher for edge. But when we go to just Cape Town, when we have, again, more comparable units, we also see a reduction in consumption for edge households. This in itself is interesting, but for us, what is more interesting, because this was a pilot, is, well, how this can be biased, right? So one way that can be biased is in terms of income. And, here we see that more or less the distribution, the shape of the distribution, and sorry because I'm kind of rushing a bit through this, but the shape of the distribution of the pilot household, again, very small sample, but it's similar. So it doesn't look like maybe it's coming from there. Maybe the edge household report that they are a bit better financially than non-edge. Probably there is a bit more of prosperity on the edge side. But even when we take into account this, and this is just a question that in some contexts wouldn't make sense, but actually there are some households, more than 10% of households that couldn't afford to pay for electricity some days of the month. So you have, it's that type of user. But when we control for income, we actually see still like very similar results. So instead of 47, we see 51 kilowatt hours less, instead of very similar consumption. But for water, we also see the same results. The point is that, at least based on the pilot, it looks like even just a very simple strategy to balance the sample makes it so that income, controlling for income doesn't matter that much, which is good news for when we scale this up for the main phase. And then the final thing I will show is that we have smart meter data, typically 6 hours time period. Just with that, we can also see a bit of a different consumption pattern of edge and non-edge. And the edge households, typically the difference is that they have some form of solar water, could be solar water heater or a PV panel that is wired to a resistant water heater. But that creates a bit of a different consumption pattern. This is for non-edge. So you can see that there is this big spike around 2 p.m. that is actually there, but is smaller for edge. So this suggests that there is something going on, and we'll pinpoint it more with the main phase. And the final thing that I will mention is at the very end, even edge households, many of edge households report not using the technology. And in their case, the technology means smart thermostat for their domestic hot water, for the water heater. And anecdotally, we hear time and again that people, for example, they switch off their water heater, either because they think that it's going to save them money, but if you switch off your solar water heater during the day, guess what? You're not using sun energy, you're still using grid energy. So that is not irrational. The message from the South Africa government when they had electric water heaters was switch off the water heater in the day, you're going to save money. But now that we switch to solar, that legacy behavior is a problem. So something that we are taking a close look at, and we actually thinking of maybe doing a complementary study, is to see how we can ensure that users are making the most out of their green building homes, so that potentially what I'm showing you, if it's confirmed in the main phase, it could be even a lower bound. It could be even higher savings if we get the users to fully utilize what they have. And with that, I conclude, and thank you for being here, and very happy to answer your questions. I think here I will share the bullets maybe with the other speakers. Maybe there are questions for them, but.
So I came in a bit late, so I might have missed this, but how does take-up of the program work?
Take-up of the program?
Yes, for example, how do these participants select into the program? And I was just looking at it vis-a-vis the outcomes.
Perfect. So again, this is the pilot, so we focus more on trying to test things. But for the service, which the take-up comes mainly from the service, so that you have to consent to everything. Typically, we see that if we can get to them, they're very happy to participate. We offer some incentive, like 200 rands for each wave of the survey, so that's around a bit more than $10, which is, again, substantial. So they're typically happy to participate. We even tested for the second wave for the survey, just a very cheap email recontact strategy, and just that achieved 50%, which is high for this standard. Originally, we tried WhatsApp, we tried flyers, even like hangers on their doors. We have access to the property managers on site. So I would say that in general, take-up doesn't seem to be an issue.
So I think the question I'm getting to is, how do you determine that the differences in outcomes are not due to selection in terms of the people who take up the program?
So for that, we try to be very careful in how we try to get people to participate and do it in the same way, in the same people. What is more worrying, potentially, is the selection into the buildings, because you could have people who are going to consume less because they are very climate conscious, self-select into edge buildings, but they would consume less even if they live in a conventional building. Exactly. So for that, unfortunately, we cannot get an experimental setting. The way that we're trying to control for that is to have in the survey questions that try to basically get information about the degree of climate consciousness and anything behavioral that can affect this. But unfortunately, it's not an experimental setting, but we're trying to do the best we can with the non-experimental setting to address that. It's a very good point.
Sandro, this is such an impressive piece of work, and I hope that your team is really proud of themselves for developing this kind of raw data. It's really exciting to see. So thank you. I had a question that was actually a reflection from back when we were designing the MAGC business case back in, this is 2017, 2018, and the UK's M&E team at the time was really concerned about what they called the performance gap. And they meant, and I think you touched on a little bit in terms of behavior, but they meant the idea that because you were living in such a more efficient house, you would actually end up consuming more. And I was just wondering, in your study as you designed it, how you thought about measuring behavior and changes over time, and if you built that into the surveys.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a very good point. The typical culprit when you don't find an effect of energy efficiency is what's called rebound effect, that for the same amount of money now you can be more toasty in your home, for example. South Africa, typically they don't have central heating or central cooling, so the effect is through the domestic hot water as mentioned. We still, we piloted this, but we only had about 45 units with domestic hot water monitoring system, and we only had a few weeks of data. So we haven't looked into that, but we will look into the question, is it that people are saving because they're now taking cold showers? And it's not so extreme. We actually find that some people, the same way that they switch off their water heaters, they still want some domestic hot water. So we have actually done a lot of field work, and especially University of Cape Town team, and they have seen that some people have switched to these super unsafe solutions. It's basically like a bucket with a resistant element under that has no cover. So, you know, if there's a kid running, it can spill over them. But it's kind of, they think it's a cheap solution to just heat a bit of water. And this is especially on non-edge homes that don't have the solar element. So those type of questions and information we're keeping a very close eye on, because they can have a big impact. Maybe taking one step back, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that any savings are controlled for comfort. In the case of South Africa, it's through domestic hot water. But in other settings, we might have, typically in Colombia and Indonesia also no central cooling or heating, but you could have the space heaters or the fans working. So we're keeping an eye on that to try to have a proper comparison. I don't know if maybe Simon, you want to talk on that. Okay.
So just following up on that question, actually, the rebound effect. I mean, it was interesting to hear you say that actually on the electricity side, it seemed very clear that there was the expected reduction in usage, or in volume of usage. But on the water side, it wasn't. And intuitively, you would think it'd probably be the other way around, yeah? Because you're not really going to have a second bath, or But so you'd have thought that if you've got a better faucet, then you are just going to be saving. So it'd be interesting to look into that a little bit more.
People are creative, Will. So what happens is, well, first of all, once we go and look at Cape Town, we do see a bit of, we see savings on the edge side. But what happens is many people change the fixtures, for example, in the showers, either because of comfort, they like the higher flow, or in some cases, the developers have told us that some of the batches of water efficient shower heads, for example, they tend to clog more. So the users would replace them. So basically, we don't see it here. I mean, we still see when we look at Cape Town that edge saves a bit more, but we're also keeping a very close eye on anything that is people changing their homes, either through renovations or just through changing the parts that they, you know, they don't know that they're helping. Because what's the point of moving into a water efficient home if you're going to change the shower heads or the faucets, and then it's no longer efficient. So in many cases, people not realizing that. So that factors both in the research strategy to make sure that we are comparing what we think we're comparing, but also in this potential research about further training users in making the most out of their home.
Thank you. The other question I had was, does your research cover the concept of developing green buildings over time becomes cheaper and cheaper?
No, this is a point in time. The only kind of time variant element that we have is, for example, in South Africa, we have a bit of different cohorts. So we have a bit of different versions of edge. For us, that's mostly a challenge to control for, but it does also provide some information on maybe the evolution. On the cost side, we are not focusing on the cost part, except when it comes to the saved cost of utilities. But it's something that we coordinate very closely with the edge team. And if it's something that you think, you know, we should maybe focus more, happy to talk more about that.
Necessarily in this one, going forward. What I understand, and our edge colleagues will know far more than me, but I think there is some evidence that for developers that are developing green, they work out how to do it in a much more efficient way at the time.
For example, one of the presentations we had was as the Green Building Council of South Africa convention. And there, the GBCSA, they have been working with developers to estimate the additional cost of building green in general. They have mostly data for commercial, but they do see that. Originally it was about 5% for commercial, it's down to 3.5% in a few years. So definitely evidence point in that way.
Final question. So this was a pilot. When will we have results that we think are robust?
So the main phase will launch hopefully February. So we plan to have preliminary results, let's say end of next calendar year, beginning of 2025. The reason is that we want to have through the season data with the full study. So I think there we already have robustness, but we're very careful, so we want to have 2 of those. So the study is expected to finish in 2026, and that's also aligned with the implementation of MAGC in general. So. Yeah, now we are finishing early, right? We can have 3 years of it.
So I just want to reflect on what Will has just mentioned about, you know, like in the future, the cost of building green will be decreasing. You know, when with the market awareness being raised, right, then people are more aware about the benefits of building green. So therefore, with the time, we will be able to increase the baseline in all of the design and construction. So therefore, the incremental cost will be decreased by the time.
Correct, and we are in the type of business that if we do a good job, we'll be out of business, right? But even when research is more pronounced, because if we manage to move, thank you, Pablo. If we manage to move the edge towards net zero, and we have, you know, we have some site visits of projects that try to already be off-grid for electricity and water. If that becomes at the scale, then, you know, no longer, we don't need to research what is the non-renewable consumption of a net zero. It's net zero, right? I mean, you can go and check, but we still probably, unfortunately, sufficiently away from that still this is useful. But I agree that if we do a good job, you know, we'll move on to other things. So I think we're probably right on time. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Please be in touch if you have any other questions, if you have any ideas. And thanks again to the UK for their support, and to Climate Business and Development Impact for you know, being so generous with the program. Thank you again. Have a good day.